So here's the interpretation. And this time it's from the one and only Genki Oda. Now hear us out on this, because we talk about Genki Oda quite a bit, especially with his connection with BitPoint, connection with JVCEA, in regards to the Japanese version of the SEC. And then on top of that, SBI. He's a big wig when it comes to all this. Decision maker. You name it, right? So getting more into what we have, let's get into this. All right, so he states today, and in reality, this is not today, it's a little while back, but it kind of flew under the radar. I thought I'd bring it to you guys. But anyway, he says they submitted a request for tax reform regarding crypto assets. With regard to Web3, while various reforms are being carried out, if the tax reform is realized, Japan will become the center of the Web3 in the world, basically. Web3 in the world. Again, the request for tax reform is not a request for tax reform for crypto asset users and user asset exchanges, but a request for tax reform for just that, Japan. Now, we have talked about some of these things in the past in regards to tax reform in Japan and how big it can be. Goes on to also mention, it is estimated that the revision of the tax system will increase the probability that crypto assets will return to Japan and increase tax revenue. And this is big, because probability that crypto assets will return to Japan is a big proponent, right? Not just for Japan, but the rest of the world. You got to keep in mind, and this is why we always show you guys some of these things that you may feel as though it has nothing to do with crypto. Has everything to do with crypto, right? Just because it doesn't say crypto on it has still everything to do with crypto. We know basically that, Japan still ranks number 3 overall when it comes to global GDP, gross domestic product. So the probability that crypto assets will return to Japan is a big deal, for the same reason why we gave that outline earlier, that, hey, guess what? You may not be invested into BTC. You may not be invested into Ethereum, but they still represent 81% of the overall crypto market. We still need to pay attention to all these things. It says we will continue to work for Japan. Here's some, of course, of his references. Again, it's all in Japanese, because he's not really talking to us here in the United States. He's talking to people in Japan. But again, I follow this stuff. All right, jumping to the next part of what we have. Give me just a second. I'll be right back in about 30 seconds. All right, sorry about that. So jumping into the next part of what we have in regards to Jasmy, a little bit more on this outline. I want to jump into this, and this is something that you guys brought to my attention, I guess you could say like late July, but I never had a chance to get more into this. And if anything, this is still good. I want you to see this for a second. So I got to give an honorable mention to what's going on with Hyundai and Kia, because basically speaking, again, introducing blockchain-based CO2 emission monitoring system for suppliers. What are some of the key takeaways? Well, it's just that IoT applications are beginning on the blockchain. That's a great thing, right? Because especially when we talk about with Jasmy, they're all about IoT, are they not? There's other proponents from blockchain in regards to IoT and so on. Not just Jasmy, but the key thing going on with Toyota, right? Not that my focus should be on and your focus should be on, even though you see all these tagged here, Ethereum, XRP, XLM, HBAR, Algorand, Quant, Casper, you could definitely include the likes of Jasmy on the list, because like it says, transactions between autos and other devices will be massive. Jasmy, of course, has that, key thing going on with Toyota, right? Not directly with Toyota, but if anything, like we confirmed, one of their subsidiaries. If you understand the concept of, Daimler, Chrysler, Benz, right? You understand the subsidiaries, the Mopars of the world, right? Same type of example. So Hyundai being on Hyperledger. What did I talk about in the last deep dive video when it came to Jasmy and QNT? Hyperledger. Yeah, Hyperledger. Pay attention to what's always going on in Hyperledger. So I'm not going to get into all of this, but I want to jump to this part real quick. Hyundai's in-house startup program. Hyundai Motor Group has been nurturing in-house startups since 2000 in order to generate new ideas about innovative products and services. The program has introduced 53 in-house startups as of March of 2020, 13 of which have been successfully spun off from Hyundai. In addition, 10 companies have completed preparations for spin-offs so far. Goes on to also mention that in the early stages, in-house startups were mainly focused on the auto parts related business. However, their targets have been widened to include a wide range of future-oriented business fields such as mobility, blockchain, IoT, and eco-friendly materials. Very true. Very well, worth pointing out. Again, a little bit more about Hyundai. They have announced a new partnership with IBM. And think about this for a second. Remember how we always reference IBM, especially when it comes to Hyperledger. Hyundai has announced a new partnership with IBM to advance the use of what? Blockchain tech and cloud-based AI. Cloud-based AI, who is also trying to, accomplish some of these things. Yeah, you better believe it. Jasmy. IBM will focus on creating new supply chain financing ecosystem using open source Hyperledger Fabric. Again, the key thing is this: the common, and I hate to use this expression, right? But it's something we always say as teachers, especially if you ever taught math. The common denominators, if you will. The project aims to automate manual processes, reducing cost and lead time, and through that, improving customer experience. Again, we talked about innovation earlier. It's all about innovation, believing in the research, clean technology. All these are contributors towards Society 5.0. All right, a little bit more in regards to the Jasmy coverage. And again, on this segment, I want to show you guys some big things. All right, so apologize to anybody on the DM box, but if I click on the actual specific one for the screenshot, it shrinks it down. So I want to make it nice and big. So thank you to Forza Lecce, Simon Greco. I believe this is who this is. Marc-Aurele Brun. This is the guy I want to introduce to you. He's a senior project manager over at cell therapy at Sony Corporation. Who is this guy, and why should Max make such a big deal, or why even bring it to you guys? Well, if anything, I'm going to show you why right now. And this is pretty cool stuff. So we do use Justia for our reference source when it comes to patents. We've done this numerous times. We originally did it when it came to Kazumasa Sato. So let's introduce this guy, Marc-Aurele Brun. And if anything, remember some of the key things I mentioned previously, either on the live show or some of the recordings, right? So let's get into it. The patents by inventor Marc-Aurele Brun. Marc-Aurele Brun, if I'm pronouncing that right, could be butchered up. I apologize. He has filed for patents to protect the following inventions. This listing includes patent applications that are pending, as well as patents that have already been granted by the United States. Yes, the United States Patent and Trademark Office, USPTO. Yeah, believe it or not, we are now getting into the weeds of the United States. Max is not just focusing on Japan. Who said I ever was trying to focus on Japan? If Japan is what's trending and that's what's in the news, we'll report that. If we have something solid in regards to the United States, we'll report that as well, right? We're going to pay attention to all of it. Let's jump into this next part. Blood coagulation system analyzer, blood coagulation system analysis method and program. What was something similar that you saw not too long ago with some of our previous deep dives? What was going on with Kazumasa Sato, right? And that was for Japan. This one's for the United States. Is this guy connected with Kazumasa Sato? Well, absolutely. We'll show you guys a little bit more about that here in a bit. This publication number, you can nerd it out. What's some of the abstract? Well, like it says, there's provided blood coagulation system analyzer, including a measurement section and analysis section. The measurement section measures a time change of impedance of a blood sample, which is obtainable by applying an alternating electric field to the blood sample. The analysis section extracts a parameter indicating the characteristics of the impedance from the measured data, again, measured data of the time change of the impedance. Furthermore, the analysis section analyzes a degree of enhancement of blood coagulation on the basis of a comparison of the extracted parameter with at least one reference value, which defines the criteria of the enhancement of blood coagulation. When it was originally found? 2019. Who was one of the inventors? Yeah, this guy, Marc-Aurele Brun. Why should that matter to you? Well, here's the thing. The plugs, if you will, for the United States and so on. Another thing you should take away from this is what? Again, guys, think about why we pay attention to all the deep dives that we do here. The CARE project. Who's also partnered with the CARE project? Ripple. Now, Jasmy doesn't have a direct partnership with Ripple, but again, like I've mentioned in previous other deep dives, birds of the feather flock together, right? That's the bottom line. Key partnerships for the goal of, right, Society 5.0 and so on. As we get more and more into this, there's other more up-to-date patents and so on. Talks more about this blood coagulation, but your key takeaway, again, should be this guy, Marc-Aurele Brun, and what he, has to bring to the table. Now, for a brief moment, we're going to talk about this patent, terahertz spectrometer, and I'm going to show you an example about this here in a moment. So this is something that includes an optical fiber and emitter. The optical fiber is branched from a gain fiber constituting, let me pronounce that right, an ultra-short pulse oscillator. The emitter generates a terahertz wave from a pulse beam guided from the gain fiber through the optical fiber. Again, what is one of the key things for Jasmy? Internet of Things, IoT. These are some of the Internet of Things. All right. What I want to show you guys again here, what's the key thing from this takeaway? Who is the assignee? It's Sony. That's interesting. And if anything, it's interesting because when I get more into this outline, I'm going to show you that the main key thing is Kazumasa Sato also doing many patents, but this guy being a partner with Kazumasa Sato. Now, we know that Sato was a former Sony executive, okay? And, of course, these former Sony executives are now part of Jasmy. But one of the key criticisms that Jasmy gets, especially recently or in the past and so on, is that, okay, former keys to Sony, but you don't have anybody active in Sony, right? Is that a good argument that they mentioned? Well, for me, that's not such a great argument, but I can understand people's point. But one of the cool things is this guy still having that Sony connection. Well, it hasn't been recent, Max? Oh, yeah, you better believe it has been recent. Goes on a little bit more about some of these other things, even dating back to 2009, but that's not the point. The point is what I want to show you in regards to a little bit more about this. Hopping over to pubmed.ncbi.nlm. There's this piece about this, and it goes into some detail that you want to pay attention to. And number one is the contrast improvement of terahertz images of thin histopathological sections. Now, you may think, man, I don't know, why don't you just talk about the token, Max? There's nothing really juicy here. The hell there isn't. Look at this. We present terahertz images of 10, where the heck this means, some terminology that I'm not aware of, thick histopathologic sections obtained in reflection geometry with a time domain spectrometer. I wish I could blow this a little bit more. I try to, but it just messes everything up because of these ads and stuff. But just listen to what I got to say on this. It says, in this demonstration, improvement contracts for sections measured with paraffin with water. Automated segmentation is applied to the complex refractive index data, generated clustered terahertz images, and here's this part, distinguishing cancer from healthy tissues. That's interesting because if anything, this tells me again, full. I don't have to get in writing from the CARE project. This totally gets me to the point where I could draw my own conclusions. You know, at the end of the day, we're not dumb when it comes to this stuff. We're not oblivious when it comes to this stuff. You know, there's reasons why Jasmy has these key partnerships, CARE projects especially, and even not just the CARE project, right? Contributing to this concept of Society 5.0 blankets a whole spectrum that people just aren't really aware of. I mean, you know, when we talk about the examples of like public transportation, that's just one sector. What about the medical sector of things, right? The degree classification of pixels is then evaluated using registered visible microscopic images. Principal component analysis and propagation simulations are employed to investigate the origin and the gain of image contrast. Now, where am I going to go with this? Well, if anything, show some of these figures, and you can look more into it yourself. I mean, it's kind of hard to understand. But the key thing is this: medical data. Have you ever looked into it? Have you ever really, truly looked into medical data? And if anything, have you ever really, really looked into it from the point of view of how much that industry is worth? For Kazumasa Sato to have these patents, basically, you know, he's an inventor. That in itself sounds amazing, right? But coming up with key patents to contribute towards Society 5.0, right? The Internet of Things is a big, big deal because they're hitting so many industries. This is why I feel as though Jasmy is such a sleeper that people just simply don't understand. Newcomers will look at the chart and that's all they do. They haven't taken more of the deep dive research into the bigger picture of things. And that's such a shame because at the end of the day, for me personally, I want to invest in something that is going to give me that best risk to reward ratio, but if anything, a great return on investment, that ROI. Understanding all the industries that Jasmy is involved in is big, is huge, especially when understanding that, you know, when we talk about utility and emotion, and that's my main thing lately. I don't know about you, but you know, I'm not going to give up on this race that we're in, right? We got to finish the race. So many people will so many people will quit the race. And what I mean by that is they tune in, they see the overall market is crashing and so on. Oh, I don't want to be invested in this, you know. Okay. So you're going to get invested into crypto when we're, you know, back up to 3+ trillion or 4 trillion? Or how about this, in the utility run, well past 10 trillion? That's when you're going to choose to get into it? It'll be too late at that point. Why would anybody want to spend a ton of money because the narrative is, oh, now you should get into crypto? Why? Because the news outlets are now telling you? What the hell do the mainstream news outlets have ever known about crypto? They don't. They only report on two things. You guys know that. That is extreme pumps or extreme crashes, or like black swan events, like for instance, what's happened with FTX and so on, right? Those are the things they report on. They never talk about the use case of some of these cryptocurrencies. And if anything, the only time anything is mentioned in regards to use cases is if somebody like Brandon Garlinghouse of Ripple was able to do a sit-in on an interview on Fox Business or CNBC and briefly talk about it. That's about it. It's up to us as the community to basically share the community-driven news about all this stuff. All right, let's jump back into this for a moment. So the medical industry is a very, very big deal. Again, why would Kazumasa Sato go through all the trouble of inventing some of these key things and getting the patents in regards to it in Japan? But what about the darn United States? Don't you think that this is a big deal? I think it's a big deal. Let's jump more into this. So I like this. This was shared from journals.apps.org. Physical review. Urea glycerol system, liquid associated structure, studied by dielectric spectrop. I can't even pronounce some of this stuff. I'm not a medical professional, right? Majored in business, didn't major in medical, so bear with me. But again, who's referenced here? Marc-Aurele Brun. Okay. Goes on to mention some of these key things. Again, you can nerd it out. But the key thing is this: numerous different studies and, if anything, publications to support some of his key findings. I mean, like, here's an example, if you want to nerd it out more, right? Data shown for frequencies in the range, useful range, talks about this whole concept of, all this stuff. I mean, this is all technical stuff. I don't understand it, but I understand it's a big deal. And I think, if anything, you understand that's a big deal. Getting more into this. Who is this guy? The bottom line is, why is Max making a big deal about who this guy is? Well, basically speaking, look at this. His current workplace. And this is what you should pay attention to. And if anything, I'll try to blow this up a little bit more. Yeah. All right. So, Marc-Aurele Brun, project manager, cell therapy at Sony-based Kunin in Tokyo. Previously, he was a student at, and it gives more of his profile, but that's not the point. The point is this right here. Been working as a senior project manager, cell therapy at Sony for 3 years. Sony. So for some of the negative naysayers who want to say the former Sony executives are not connected with anybody at Sony, the hell they're not, right? Like it says, Sony is part of the electronics industry and located in Japan. But the point is, this guy, cell therapy at Sony for the last 3 years, partnered up with who? Partnered up with Kazumasa Sato. That should be one of your key takeaways. And of course, his connection to what? The United States. So my point is this: when we share some examples, and I shared it last week, and that is, basically speaking, sharing, the examples of Avita in English. And then before, it was always focused on, the Japanese versions and so on. You're starting to see a lot of little indicators of this shift. Not so much a shift in where all the focus is on the United States, but it's a combination of things. Some of the focus is obviously in Southeast Asia, right? Specifically, like looking at Hong Kong and so on. Obviously, Japan. We talked a little bit of some of these other areas. And then, of course, things that were speculative. Kunitake Ando's office for many, many years that was established in the San Francisco Bay Area. Now this guy, right? Again, shout out to Simon Greco for sharing some of this on a DM. Really appreciate the community-driven news to be able to share it with you all. If you too would like to be a sideline reporter of CTN, go ahead and follow me at DPG Maximus. All you got to do is either DM me or tag me, and I'll share some of that news with our community.